We are super excited to be here with you guys as she welcomed us to the stage. I'm Christina Sarasoli, Senior Vice President of Retail Strategy for the National Retail Federation. For the next 45 minutes, we are going to talk about succeeding as an entrepreneur. How do you get started? And what do you do when the bumps come? We've got three of the best with us here today, Michael, Kavita, and Alexa. And I'm just going to kick it over to them right now, let them introduce themselves, and tell us a little bit about the inspiration for your company and what's your role.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexa, and I'm one of the co-founders of Margot. First and foremost, I want to thank the NRF for having me. As someone who went from being a student to starting a company of my own, this is an exceptionally special opportunity. And I launched Margot in 2015, about a year after graduating from college. It was certainly not the plan. I, as a senior in college, had plans to go back into the corporate job I'd interned in the summer before. And during my senior spring of college, when I had probably a little bit of too much time on my hands, I started with my partner, Sarah, dreaming up the idea for Margot. And I think as many businesses do, it originated from a problem that we had both experienced, which at the simplest level was the shoe shuffle that so many women living in a city or elsewhere do when you have your kind of comfortable shoes that you wear on a day-to-day basis, and then at some point you change into your pretty shoes. And we thought, like, why is this? There could be a better way. There could be just a single pair of shoes that you put on in the morning and you feel beautiful and confident and dressed in. And those are the shoes that can take you from your apartment to the subway, to the gym, to work, to dinner and drinks and beyond. And you could feel beautiful and really confident. So we started digging into the idea. We started taking secret trips to New York to prototype. All the while, no one knew about this. And by the time graduation rolled around, we decided we were too in love with the idea to give up on it. So we called our respective employers, told them we found this idea that we're really passionate about and in love with, and we're going to do this instead. So we dove headfirst into creating the perfect wear everywhere shoes that were as beautiful as they were comfortable. And along the way realized that the even larger opportunity really existed around fit and creating shoes that fit perfectly. Today we offer a crazy range of sizes and widths and custom offerings, and have been able to build an exciting business by really carving out this niche of fit in the footwear market.
So I'm the founder of Fresh Paper, and Fresh Paper is a really simple technology that can keep food fresh for longer. It actually is a little sheet of paper that you put in a refrigerator drawer or a fruit bowl, but it actually is designed for large-scale growers and producers. So, in a world where we lose over a third of our world's food supply to spoilage, it's a pretty disruptive technology. But Fresh Paper actually started as my middle school science project. It was inspired by a home remedy that my grandmother in India once gave me to drink. So I was visiting her, and I was really excited to see her. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I didn't get to go see her a lot. And the only thing my mom told me to do was to be really careful about not drinking tap water. And so, of course, on my first day there, I was brushing my teeth, and I drank like an entire cup of water. And I started to panic. I was convinced I was going to get really sick. And my grandmother just went in her kitchen, which was like a little stone room, and she came back with this like mixture of different spices. It looked to me like muddy water. She said, if you drink this, you'll be totally fine. So I was really skeptical, but I didn't have any other option. And I drank it. And I actually, to my surprise, ended up not getting sick. And I remember still that for me as a 12-year-old girl, that was such a pivotal moment because it felt almost magical. And today I'm so grateful that I was only 12, so I wasn't skeptical. I didn't have that doubt, and I just really believed in what my grandmother had shown me. And so that began for me what became like this lifelong obsession with these spices that my grandmother seemed to have so much knowledge about. And I came back home to the United States, and I did this middle school science project where it was super scientific. I took jars of dirty pond water and added spices to them. So I left them in my garage, really basic. I still have no idea what I was hoping to discover. But believe it or not, that actually was the genesis of what became Fresh Paper, because I kind of forgot about it, but I had that innate curiosity that I think we all have as children. And one day I was looking at the jars like several weeks later, and I was like, hey, something's going on. Some of these jars don't have as much gunk. So that was the beginning. To make a long story short, I started to realize that many of these spices were antifungal and they had applications. And the only place that I could think of applying them as a student was in food, because the only place I'd really seen mold was like on strawberries in the grocery store. So, I spent most of my high school years as this like weird kid rotting fruits and vegetables in my garage. And then I eventually developed the technology that became fresh paper. And I still remember, for me, when I was a senior in high school, I found out that I was going to win the science fair, and I actually was able to get a patent for my invention. And I remember, for my parents, their biggest dream was that I would go to college. I was acutely aware that my grandmother, with all of her brilliance, she never had the opportunity to pursue her ideas. And here I was, I had a patent, I was on my way, I was going to Harvard, and I thought for sure I was going to be able to do something with my idea. But what most people don't know is, at that point, it took me almost 10 years to actually take the next step with my idea. So I went to college, I set out to build a nonprofit. I actually learned how hard it can be to give something away for free. And most of the next several years, when I was exactly your age, were the years where it seemed everywhere I turned, every expert I talked to, they told me that I would need a lot more experience, a lot more money, and just a lot more than I felt like I would ever be. And I think, I look at all the young women in the room, and I'm so inspired because, I look back and I think a lot of the reasons that I struggled to even be taken seriously or to raise money in a lot of those early meetings was because I was this young girl walking in with an idea, and they had no idea what to do with it. So fast forward 10 years, I gave up. I had no idea what I was going to do. I left college without a plan, without a job, thinking I'd wasted most of my life on an idea that was going nowhere. And then about 5 years ago, really as kind of my last hope, I set up a little stand at my local farmer's market. I handmade fresh paper. I took supplies from the kitchen. I started with about $300, and it was really the beginning of what became a grassroots phenomenon. So, today fresh paper is in most of the largest grocers, household retailers, and stores across the globe. We ship to over 35 countries, and we work with the largest suppliers to help them keep their supply chain fresh as well. But it all really started with this moment of inspiration that I never imagined would have me end up in a place like this. So I'm really excited to share more with you guys and to get to know you.
That's awesome. Hi, everyone. Michael Astoria, co-founder of And Pizza. Just quick background on myself. I actually grew up in a small hamlet, not even a town, south of Buffalo, New York. So if you don't know what a hamlet is, it's very, very, very small. So I actually grew up in a place with less than 500 people, packed my bags, went to college in California, because when you grow up in Buffalo, you realize pretty quickly that you want sun, and wherever there's more sun, you run as fast and as far as you can towards that. Graduated school, then moved to New York City because I felt like I needed to go to a place that would give me an opportunity to sort of be something. And graduating with sort of a generic business degree, I had two options. One was go into sales, and I tried that for 6 weeks, and that wasn't necessarily me. So option two was start a company. So I started my first company 6 weeks out of school, ended up sort of getting a little bit lucky, sort of right time, right place, entrance into a market, ended up building a media company that I sold to a private equity group in about 4 short years, stayed on board to run that as CEO for 3 years thereafter, and then started a really cool creative services agency. So think sort of a modern version of Mad Men, and that's what gave birth to the vision behind And Pizza. So working on a lot of really cool consumer brands, wanted to build a brand that I felt was more reflective of my sort of own personal journey and core values. So And Pizza really is about creating a cultural movement around a core set of values. And what's up with this sort of weird, funny name called And Pizza? Well, the idea was leading with a symbol that best reflected those core values. And it was really about promoting diversity, celebrating sort of unity and connectedness, and really bringing people together in a world and a country that I felt was becoming increasingly more divisive. Wouldn't it be really cool to have this ampersand, this symbol, this rallying cry that people could work for and that would ultimately inspire them? So I packed my bags. I was living in New York, moved to Washington, D.C. to start And Pizza. And the really cool thing about it is we have made it our own personal mission to fight and promote a living wage. We have this belief that the strength of our business is really tied to the strength of our people. And so we pay a living wage, we listen to our people, we respect our people, and ultimately we're stronger for that. We call our employee base a tribe, and the irony in all of this is of the sort of 600, 700 tribe members that we have working for the company, over 100 of them have the brand tattooed on them as a result of them feeling super, super passionate about the company that they're working for. Not like I'm some crazy dictator that says you have to do this, but it was just that it was a cool symbol and they wanted it because they felt like this was an extension of themselves and something they were proud to be a part of. We've also rolled out this program called Little Giants, which is all about sort of promoting like-minded brands doing big things in our communities that we serve. We have an ant charity arm that we've supported over 1,000 causes, and we design every pizza shop to be differently. So every pizza shop reflects the sort of fabric of the communities or neighborhoods that we serve. So it's sort of this counterculture, funky, offbeat, collective of pizza shops that are now 26 and counting, from Virginia to Washington, D.C., Maryland, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New York City. There's one in Nomad, one in Astor Place here, and we're expanding to Boston, Miami, and looking across the pond at London and beyond. So we've raised over $60 million in growth equity. We have unbelievable partners. We just raised capital from Steve Ross of Related Group, who owns Equinox, SoulCycle, the Miami Dolphins, and just really excited about continuing to kind of grow and spread our gospel. So if you've seen our pizza boxes, they're shaped differently. Our pizza's a little bit funky because everything that we do, we want to make sure that it's our version or our vision of what a pizza shop should be, of what a consumer brand should be, of what we think the future of retail should be. So just super stoked to be here and happy to share sort of my vision of what has worked for me and what maybe can work for you all.
I'm super stoked too. They have so many good stories. I really wish we could sit here all afternoon, but let's keep going. Each of you had a moment or several moments where you could have chosen to take a little bit more traditional path. Can you talk about how you came to your decision to go out on your own?
Yes. So my senior year at Harvard, I had a job offer to go back to the private equity firm that I had interned at the summer before. As I said, it was during that senior spring that we really dreamt up this idea for Margot. And it really wasn't until graduation when Sarah and I were sitting in the crowd with our families. It was pouring rain, and Sheryl Sandberg was the commencement speaker. And she kind of opened her speech by asking the crowd what they would do if they weren't afraid. And it was sort of in that moment when we both knew the answer, we locked eyes, and it was just like, Margot, that's the thing. So it took us about 3 days to muster the courage to make those phone calls. I practiced the phone call like 4 times to the employer. I'm not coming back. And then we took that leap of faith together. And about 7 days later, had moved to New York, working in an office that had no windows and could only fit 1.5 desks, and dove in head first. So, I look back on that first 2-3 months, and as terrifying as crazy as it was, I'm not only so glad we did it, but I'm so glad we jumped in fast, because I think in any business, you learn pretty quickly that there are those moments where it just feels like it's not going to work. And by taking that leap of faith, you are all in. And I think the best entrepreneurs know how to, when this obstacle comes and there's this mountain, you find a way around, over, or through it, because you don't have a choice and because you believe so deeply in the larger vision that you set out to accomplish. So that was our leap of faith in June of 2014. We haven't looked back, and it's been a really wild ride since.
When I first started, I never imagined that fresh paper would be a consumer product. So I designed it as a technology for people in the developing world. Over 1 billion people live without refrigeration. My grandmother was one of them. And I never imagined that food spoilage was actually an issue in places like the United States. So when I first started, the only path I was thinking about was building a nonprofit. And, as I shared with you, that was actually really challenging, and I found it really hard to get the experts and the large organizations that I would want to partner with to believe in the idea. So I actually, when I took that first step and just set up a stall at the farmers market, it felt so non-traditional. And I think, having graduated from college, having all the weight and the prestige and the pressure behind where I went to school, and also, my immigrant parents putting me through school, it was really, really hard. And I could tell that, all of a sudden I was choosing this path as really a paper peddler. I was literally standing on the streets in Harvard Square. My college classmates would walk by, and I know a lot of people were like, I hope everything's okay. I wonder what's going on there, because I would just be handing out these sheets. But that was how we started to build the business. And the other kind of non-traditional approach we took, really because we had no other option, was to not take funding. So even though I realized very quickly that there was a tremendous consumer market for the product, I still really wanted to make sure that we got it to those that could benefit from it most. And I wanted to set up a social enterprise, but because of my experience, I wanted to do something that was a for-profit. I felt like it would be really important to see if we could start a brand where we could be completely mission-driven, but also have a strong brand and actually have consumers buy the product simply because they liked it, but then actually help us fund what we would hope would be partnerships with nonprofits. So I never expected that we would be able to scale up to working with retailers like Walmart or serving the scale that we do without taking any funding. But I think, kind of that non-traditional path really worked out nicely for us because we were just very open to serving exactly what our customer needed and providing that to them. So it's been a very non-traditional path the entire way, but I would say that was probably one of the most pivotal moments.
Yeah, I think for me, outside of no viable alternative, like when I was 22, I think it really comes down to like a feeling inside that to not put forth that idea that you have would be a greater risk than the possible failure of what happens when that product hits shelves or that service gets out into the world and ultimately doesn't work. One of the things I think is so important is like the world doesn't need your version of someone else's idea. And what I call this sort of broad sea of sameness where you're reading a trend and you're building something off of a trend. If it's trend, you've already missed it once the trades start talking about it. Like what the world needs, it needs you to be fearlessly weird with what it is that your vision ultimately should be. It should reflect who you are as an individual, and you really should have your DNA all over it. Now, to me, those are the best companies, are the ones that founders give a damn, not just about trying to make money, but they give a damn about trying to create impact, make change, put their vision of this product or service out into the marketplace, and then hopefully do some good along the way.
Each of you not only has potentially partners, but many people around you who are probably meaningful and instrumental. Can you talk a little bit about a partner, choosing a partner, but also some of the people around you who are most meaningful? We're gonna let you start, Michael.
Yeah. I mean, like as in business partner or like financial partner?
Well, let's talk about both.
Ooh. So business partnership is tough. I've had 2 successful partnerships and 1 failed partnership, and I think the challenge is that you never know how someone is going to act or behave through success or even through failure. That's wildly unpredictable. I've met people that were as good as gold, and then all of a sudden they start to make a couple of bucks and they forget who they were or where they come from, and their entire sort of value system shifts. So I think it's really about starting with, what does the end look like? Like, what is your idea of success? What are you doing this for? What's ultimately important to you? What do you believe in? And while it feels like very psychological in its approach, I think it's incredibly important, because the more you can understand how someone's going to behave down the road, you're better suited to decide whether or not that's an ultimate good partner for you. And I think that's kind of also similar on the shareholder side. Like, one of the things that I've done in going through multiple rounds of financing is making sure that shareholders understand, like, you're doing this for long-term, like, sustainable growth and success, not for like a short-term exit. So if you want to make 3 to 5x your money, which is a lot of VC and private equity in 3 to 5 years, and pizza is not the right investment for you. If you don't believe that paying a living wage and taking care of your people and potentially having higher labor costs associated with that is the right thing to do, you're not the right investor for me, right? If you just fundamentally don't believe that putting dollars to work and donating dollars and doing good in communities and neighborhoods that you serve, if it's all about the bottom line and the economic model, this isn't the right company. So being okay with where you do have leverage, making sure that you find the right people that subscribe to the same belief system and values that you have. I also understand that that's a little pie in the sky, because sometimes you just need money, or sometimes you just need a business partner to like get you off the couch or like make it happen. And so the reality is you just know that there's no perfect world, there's no perfect partnership, and just do your best to surround yourself or that company with mentors and advisors and thought partners, and then make sure contractually that you have a way of getting out of a contract. So it's kind of like going into a marriage, not that I recommend that with a contract, but in a business partnership, I do recommend going into a business partnership with a contract, because it makes conversations easier. We have a way of dealing with, if we both don't agree, who do we go to make that deciding vote or make that decision? And there's a lot of ways that you can do that, but just be very thoughtful about not only getting into partnership, but also getting out of partnership.
Is that your experience too, Alexa?
Completely. I'm lucky enough to have a business partner, and I think any entrepreneur can agree that building a business is a daily roller coaster, and sometimes the highs and the lows happen within an hour of each other. And so in that way, I feel exceptionally fortunate to have someone to kind of weather those storms with. And I would also agree from a business perspective. I think we've learned in now raising 2 rounds of funding that the most important thing in an investor is somebody who shares your vision, because they are coming on as part of the team, and they are in it, hopefully, with you for the long run. But the people who aren't, and the people who are there to get out in maybe 3 to 5 years, have a really different incentive structure. They have really different goals, and those goals and those visions may not align, and may force you to do things for your business and your brand that maybe serve you in the first year, but definitely not in the next 5 to 10. So we just wrapped up a round of funding, and I think the greatest piece we learned is that it's a marriage, and that going into it, you kind of immediately hit it off and you spend 2 hours discussing the future of all the things you can accomplish, or you realize, you know what, we're going to hold out and we're going to grit our teeth and we're going to wait till we find that person that we're ready to build this business with.
Want to add anything?
Yeah, well, so my business partner is actually also my life partner, so I can definitely vouch for how much it is like a marriage. But, I think
Literally.
I would agree with both of you that, there is something really critical about those people that are with you in the very, very early days. And, whenever we talk about how we started, it's so rare and so important to have that one person who remembers what it was like, to be standing on the street, setting up a farmer's market stall, or when you made your first big shipment, deconstructing a pallet and walking up 7 flights of stairs to my studio apartment. And I think, that really is kind of the best parts of it. But I think, I hear from so many students, especially your age, about how do I choose a partner? What are really the best ways to consider? And I think you both gave excellent advice. The only other thing that I would add is just think really consciously about your intentions. I think, why it has worked out really well for me and my partner in all respects is that we really shared the same intention, and we were very strongly mission-driven in why we were building this business. And it sounds like both of your partners are similar. But I think having those really tough conversations really early and making sure that you're all entering the business and want to see the idea grow in the same way can really help tremendously. But I think it's incredibly important sometimes to have those early people with you. And then in addition to my partner, I think one of the most critical advisors for me was somebody I would not have expected, but it was my first customer. And he's now almost like family to me, but his name is Tony Russo, and he was a 3rd generation family farm stand owner in Massachusetts. And I remember walking into his farm store and just thinking it was the most beautiful place. And my biggest dream in life was to one day have fresh paper at the registers in his store. And Tony took a leap of faith. He ordered 400 sheets. It took us 4 near all-nighters to produce them. But he really taught us how to build a business from the ground up. And he has been such a significant person in my life. So I would say, in addition to business partners, just be open to the kinds of mentors and advisors that will be appearing throughout your life that you might not even anticipate could play a really critical part in your growth. And actually, a lot of those people are in this room right now, and you're going to be meeting them throughout the weekend. So I really encourage you to be open to that.
7 floors is a lot of floors.
Yeah. It was not easy.
You have to take a break on like 5 or...
Yeah, we would deconstruct the boxes and take a break, pass out, do it again.
I love it.
Yeah, I didn't know what a pallet was. I had to Google it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't know when it showed up at the door that it was like a giant thing that you have to deconstruct.
You could
so,
fit inside
yeah.
a pallet.
But I learned that. You learn.
Well, you guys talk a little bit about mentors, and also how do you continue to grow as an entrepreneur? In some ways, each of you are out in front, and you've made a bet on yourself. But at the same time, you must feel that it's important to reinvest in yourself somehow, and whether that's some things you do or also who you surround yourself with. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you have to be committed to working on, because I think you can very quickly find yourself creating a company that you work for. And while we all do fundamentally work for the businesses that we create, you also want to make sure that you have an appropriate amount of time to think about and to work on the visionary, right? Because the reality is, you can always replace yourself as an operator, even as a CEO, or whatever role that you find yourself best suited for, but you can't replace the vision. And the vision is what ultimately people are buying into, and that's what's going to create differentiation 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And if you look at every great company, they're investing significant dollars in R&D and the visionary kind of stuff, where it doesn't necessarily have to work, but how you organize around a high degree of output is generally what will cause you to succeed longer term. And so for myself, I just make sure that I have dedicated time with people that are good translators. So I call them translators because they might not have a functional role, but what their job is to take things out of my head that other people don't necessarily understand, because it's a little crazy and it's a little like off kilter, and like put that in a framework that the company can understand. And that allows me to just consistently throw the ball further and further and further and have people run after that. And that's where a lot of the great innovation happens. And then develop a group of mentors, those that can help give you the sort of guidance and the balance to make sure that like your crazy isn't too crazy and it's manageable, and also causes you to get in a good cadence of listening. Because you maybe don't always listen all day long, because a lot of it is like, I have a vision, I want to execute against it, so go, 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 do. With mentors, just listen. Learn what their journey was like, how did they do it, how can I become a better leader, how do I find the time to create that for myself.
Yeah, I think who you surround yourself with is so critical, and I think that's really great advice, because especially when you're in the early stages of building, there is so much that's going to come up that you can't even anticipate. And I think there's so many moments where you're going to feel like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I was crazy to think that I could even achieve this. And so I think it's really critical to think about who you surround yourself with, especially in those early days. And I'll just tell one little story, because I think it's particularly relevant to this audience. But I remember when it was just me and my co-founder, we used to go to the farmer's market every Saturday morning. And then one day, this kid named Kevin showed up, and he was exactly the age of many of you. He was a junior in college. And he was like, I love this idea. I think this could be huge. He actually had an even bigger vision and an even bigger dream than I did. And he said, I really believe in this. I'd love to work for you. And I remember we were flattered, and I said, oh, that's so nice, but we are working out of my studio apartment. We have no money, so thank you, but maybe one day. And he actually started showing up at my studio apartment and asking to help out, because he was like, I really believe in this. I have this huge vision. This needs to be in Whole Foods. And I remember I was like, Kevin, we're working towards Whole Foods. Maybe in a year or 2 years, we can build up to Whole Foods. But he believed in it, and he started showing up. He started coming to the farmer's market. He started helping out. He was kind of that visionary at that moment in time where I needed somebody who believed so fiercely in something that now to me seems as simple as getting into Whole Foods. And I remember we actually, in a few months of going to the farmer's market, we got a call from Whole Foods. And I told Kevin, and he was thrilled. And he was like, this is it. This is going to happen. And I was like, if we can convince them to let us start in one store, that's great. Let's not let them know how small we are. So I took me and my co-founder and Kevin, which obviously was the whole company at the time, and we drove in Kevin's like really old car that didn't have AC, but we didn't have a car, so I was very grateful. And it was like a hot July day. We were literally dripping in sweat as we get into this meeting, and I think we were delirious. And Kevin was like, "This is it. It's going to happen. This is the vision." And I was like, okay, just don't let them know it's just 3 people. And I really thought that because 3 people came, they would think we were a huge company. Totally not exactly what they must have thought. But so we're there in the meeting, and I'll never forget, after we gave our pitch, they turned around and the buyer said, we love this. We'd like to launch you in the entire North Atlantic. do you guys think you could do that? And we all didn't even look at each other. We nodded our heads. We were like, absolutely, we can launch in the entire North Atlantic. Just let us know when. And I remember we got into the elevator and we just like burst into laughter. I think I actually probably started to cry because I was terrified. And I had no idea how we were going to pull it off. But somehow Kevin had his roommates come out, our friends and family came, and we actually handmade the entire first shipment to Whole Foods. I think like it was only a week late. We drove it up, and I'll never forget taking like Kevin's old car into a sea of 18-wheelers, and that was our distribution vehicle. We rolled up to their dock, we opened it up, and we unloaded, and that was really the beginning of how we started to scale nationally. But I always think about, what if I hadn't been lucky enough to just run into somebody who believed so much in this and who had that moment of vision when I actually was starting to feel a tremendous amount of doubt. So also don't underestimate your own ability, because you have so much creativity and inspiration. You're at this really unique place in your lives where you bring tremendous value to the organizations that you will join. So whether you're thinking about starting your own thing or just being that inspiration within another organization, don't underestimate your own power to be that first person who believes for somebody else.
I completely agree. I think the two of you nailed it. I would say I have two pieces of advice and words of wisdom of things I've learned in terms of making myself a better entrepreneur and founder and leader. The first came from an entrepreneur that I respect and look up to and is an important advisor to us today. And we were first working on the idea for Margot. He said, you need to spend 3 to 4 hours a week with other entrepreneurs who have nothing to do with your industry, who will just beat up your idea and ask you all kinds of questions of things that seem so obvious to you, and just poke holes. And that's the best kind of friend you can have, and it's the best kind of meeting you can have. And we were kind of stunned, and we hadn't really planned on meeting with entrepreneurs in artificial intelligence and pitching our ideas to guys building all kinds of different things, men who didn't understand the problem and women who did. But sure enough, we did that. And I think our greatest breakthrough came from that meeting with an entrepreneur in AI, who, when we were explaining our pricing program, said, you're missing one huge piece. And Sarah and I kind of left the meeting thinking, I'm not sure if he's right. And sure enough, 6 months later, we had completely iterated and reintroduced the pricing as introduced by this guy. But I think we've learned that spending time with people who can take us out of the weeds and see the 500, 1,000, 10,000 foot view of the business and the problems we're solving is critical to the business success. And at the same time, is surrounding yourself internally with people who are better than you at whatever they specialize in, because you and your partner or the co-founder of your business will always be the people who are carrying the vision. But those people who can constantly question the ways in which we're approaching it and solving it and pushing it forward every day have been the reason we've succeeded today.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so we'd love to open it up for questions now. And I believe what's going on is there's a mic right here in the middle, so if you've got a question, come on forward, and hopefully they'd be happy to answer. Thank you. It's too wild. Thank you, guys. I could sit here all day. Do you think they'd let us? Okay.
I like how we match, too.
I know, sorry.
I love these.
God, guys, this is intense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I see this ring of yours?
I know.
It's made out of pesos. Mexican pesos. So back in the day, because the peso was so undervalued, Mexican artists
It's intense.
converted it to jewelry and make more money selling.
Okay, let's go for it. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Blake Fortin. I'm from Columbia College, Chicago. And as, as a young business professional, especially for all of us, I think we have moments of where we kind of second guess ourselves when it comes to either asking questions or just making bolder moves. So my question to you is, what do you do, or best advice for like when we really do second guess ourselves in the industry?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would just try to remember when you have those moments of doubt is that when you push through the doubt and overcome whatever it is that you're scared of, all that lies on the other side is a potential opportunity. So you know what it's like right now to not have that opportunity, because that's where you are today. And I think that is a lesson I try to share with my team, which is when you're going for that big opportunity, you can think about the doubt, it's okay to acknowledge it, but just realize that when you push through it and you go to the other side and seek it, all that could happen is that you might get it. If you don't, you're right back to where you are today, and you know how to handle that. So just go for it. You have nothing to lose.
It also starts with the why behind putting that out in the marketplace, which is why I said it's best to start with something that it's riskier for you not to do it, and that will help you get through. I mean, we may be outwardly incredibly optimistic, but I can tell you what's happening internally is like a mess of emotion constantly.
I can relate.
Yeah, that's always going to be there, no matter how successful you are or not. So just like get used to the fact that doubt will forever plague your existence as it relates to being an entrepreneur. But because you believe so wholeheartedly that this needs to be out there, or you're doing something that's bigger than yourself or better for communities or neighborhoods you serve, it will help you push through.
That's great advice. And I will definitely vouch for the fact that you just get used to the doubt. It doesn't go away.
You get really comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think the nice sort of safety net to that is that if you continue to surround yourself with people who you trust, mentors have been, on our advisory board, probably the most important way to do that for us. Those people are often not your investors. They have kind of a separate interest in you and the long-term success that you can call at 12 o'clock on a Thursday when you're just like, oh my goodness, this just happened. I need a sounding board. Often it's your co-founder, but sometimes it needs to be a third party too. So we found that building an advisory board from the very beginning was so important. It gave us expertise beyond our years. It gave us credibility when we could bring these people into the fold. And we found that, making them a part of the company, whether that was giving them a piece of the company or something else, was a really great way to incentivize them in the long-term vision and really make them part of the team.
Wow, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tashaya Ernest, and I'm from Kent State University. How are you all doing today, first of all? Good.
Yeah.
Well, my question for you all was, as a busy individual and entrepreneur, how do you increase that productivity every day on your daily schedule?
I'll start. So I think the craze of the everyday can get really overwhelming, and what I finally started doing about a year ago is every morning, and you have to find whatever works for you and your routine, but every morning I sit down and I set 3 personal goals and 3 business goals for the day. And inevitably the to-do list is a lot longer than 3 business goals, but I think if you can crystallize the 3 big marquee important things that need to happen in the day, and you can also make time for yourself and figure out what those things are, you find a balance and you find a sense of satisfaction at the end of the day when you can at least say that those 3 things have been accomplished or tackled or chipped away at. And so goal setting has been personally something really important for me, and then something we've brought to the business. So Sarah and I set goals the first Tuesday of every month together. We do the same thing as a team every week. And that way everybody shares in the vision and then can celebrate the accomplishments little by little instead of only the big wins as we accomplish those things.
So I think it's really important to remember to take breaks. So I think, so often when we're starting out, it can seem so all-consuming and you feel like you have an infinite amount of work. But I think it's really important to just take a break and try to also go back to why it is that you actually started doing this anyways. So for me, sometimes that was going back to the lab or going back to my kitchen and tinkering around, doing something that didn't necessarily have an outcome that I could anticipate, but it was just a way to get away from my computer or get away from spreadsheets. So I think just try to take some breaks, step back, remember why you're doing this. And then those days where you get really overwhelmed and you feel like you just have so much work, because there really is just an unlimited amount of stuff you can do when you're getting an idea off the ground, just try to take one little step forward. In the early days, that really helped me because I would get so caught up in like, how will I scale this? And then do I find the factory and the production? And I realized just taking that first step of going to the farmer's market and then going back to the farmer's market and then putting my stuff in packaging. Every little first step just helps you, I think, make it through those early days where it can be really overwhelming to figure out what to do and how to go forward. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. My name is Katie. I'm from Indiana University. And you've all had such amazing stories, and you've come so far. You know, you did all the work from the ground up yourselves. And so I was just wondering, what has the transition been like for you to kind of become a leader and delegate all of these tasks to employees when, you know, you were the sole founder or a co-founder of your own company?
It's hard. It's really hard. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are really, really, really good individual contributors, which they can do a lot with a little and have a high degree of personal output, but don't necessarily transition correctly into leadership. So I think it's figuring out, number one, is that where you should be? Or should you hire someone to do that alongside you, and maybe a traditional, more like chief of staff role, that someone is better at the softer skills, someone that is better at team building and just broadly speaking leadership. But if you do think leadership is important, you have to study it like you study any industry, and apply the same methods to how you got started to how you can become a better leader. But it's not easy, and something I struggle with all of the time. And the challenge is that as someone who is a founder and or a CEO or someone in a leadership position, everybody studies everything you do so intensely, and so much more so than you would think. So even by default, you're leading by every time you take a step forward, a step backwards, or a step sideways.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Sierra. I'm actually also a student from Indiana University. And I wanted to ask you guys, because you talked so much about having wonderful mentors and partners in the beginning, how you were able to leverage your networks to gain traction in each of your respective industries.
At the very beginning, we took the advice of that one advisor I mentioned and said, basically tried to meet with anyone who would take 30 minutes to listen to our idea, give us their feedback, poke a few holes in it, and ask some questions. And you realize in a wonderful way that there's like a pay it forward kind of understood agreement in the world of entrepreneurs, especially here in New York. And people are really willing to listen and to help. And we tried to leave every meeting with an idea of like one or two more people that we should meet. And that's a really wonderful way to get started. And really quickly, you start to kind of dive into this ecosystem of people who are building things, and there's an incredibly like addictive energy to that ecosystem. And it's supportive, it's inspiring, and it's something that we really try today still to carve out time to kind of spend time with, because it makes us better too.
I also think, remember, as people get older, yes, inherently they get wiser, right, as they say, but they also become a little bit more selfless, and it becomes more about what can I leave behind. So you'd be surprised at how quickly you can get to somebody incredibly influential or powerful, successful in your own industry, and to ask a whole bunch of questions that they'd be willing to answer and get 30 minutes. Just be very specific about what you're asking from them, and I suspect that you'll get more response than you ever dreamed.
Thank you guys so much.
Hi, my name is Zoya. I go to Parsons School of Design here in New York. My question for you guys is, obviously as graduating students, we don't have that much experience, whether that's work experience or life experience. So what are your guys' kind of opinions on maybe taking two years or so to work in an established company, or to gain that experience and then become an entrepreneur? Or would you say to just dive in and take the leap of faith?
I think it depends. I mean, it's kind of person to person. I think there are certain industries where it's better to apprentice and learn on someone else's dime than maybe your own. I think there are other examples where actually there's an advantage to inexperience. They call it the inexperience advantage, where because you don't know anything, you do everything differently. And I think that can actually benefit you in retail and restaurants, given they're probably the most sort of confused right now in terms of what the future actually looks like. It's those that think outside the box that tend to be performing extraordinarily well versus those more conditioned to think inside the box. But if you're talking about fashion, fashion's very different. I think, apprenticeship can be really helpful. I have a number of friends that have started their own labels and lines, and they did work for somebody for a couple of years, and the knowledge they gained helped them tremendously just get the business off the ground.
I would add that it really depends on the idea and the urgency of the idea. And I think if you feel like you have something that nobody else is doing and that you better get to quickly, there's a real reason to dive in. If you feel like you have something that isn't yet fully formed, there's a reason to explore it and perhaps learn along the way. But I think what we're learning today, at least in the kind of consumer retail space, is that you really have to have something that makes you unique and that nobody else is doing to rise above the noise and to kind of give you a reason to compete with the giants. And so I would kind of focus on crystallizing what that thing is. And if it's really clear, then go for it.
Any final words of advice?
Thank you.
Do you? Thank you, guys. Thanks for having us.